Midway, that one scene in Planes, or basically any diving scene with a Stuka siren, there is a visceral feeling to watching a pilot go, either this half-ton bomb kisses you, or I do. Basically, I want to build and fly a dive bomber. Virtually, of course, because in real life I struggle with Legos and get nervous on elevators. So, I'll be playing Besiege, a medieval-style building game. That's right, the 18th century peasants get 1,000-pound bombs for free. My original inspiration for this build came from these relatively new drag blocks. When I saw them, they reminded me of those characteristic air brakes on dive bombers and knew what had to be done. Also, like in my previous builds, I'm not satisfied with just building something functional, so this plane will be completely engine powered. This usually meant overcomplicating them into horrific brace amalgamations, but this time I've put a lot of effort into improving my building skills. So, let's get started. Originally, I really wanted to build a radial engine because they are just so cool, and you see them on a lot of World War II aircraft, like the Douglas SPD Dauntless. But when you build engines, you really need to think about balancing forces. Basically, this creature I've just released is being pushed around by its own unbalanced piston forces. These water guns are not only pushing the pistons, but the entire engine. What exaggerates this issue is the very strong water guns I'm using, because this engine is inefficient at translating the linear piston movement to rotational movement. What I need is an equal but opposite force pushing against this to keep the engine steady. I held on to the radial engine dream a bit longer with this World War I styled one, where the entire crankcase spins acting like a flywheel. Technically, it's easiest to just put the guns in a turbine-like configuration, but that's lame. I really want an aesthetic and functional piston engine. It's really a shame because I spent a lot of time trying to reduce the number of moving parts and avoiding my signature move of spinning tons of braces. For those who don't know, braces have a capped angular velocity and acceleration. Clearly, I was among those who didn't know, and then was stubborn in not changing. One way to avoid the unbalanced linear forces is to ditch the water guns and use ropes, because ropes pull both ends together with the same force at the same time. You can actually get some insane power out of these in vanilla by pasting NAN as a speed value. The game will then try to tighten the ropes instantaneously. Another unbalanced force is the torque from the rotating body. To balance this, an equal torque must be applied in the opposite direction. A great example of this are helicopters, which balance the torque of their large spinning propellers with either a perpendicular, smaller propeller or another large propeller spinning in the opposite direction.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
I tried to apply both of these changes to some new radial engine designs, but they didn't have enough power without self-destructing. I can get more power if I offset the crankshaft rod bearing further from the center of rotation, but at this point I was tired of radial engines and moved on to a boxer design. I really like this design because one rope pulls in two pistons at once. I have length detectors for timing when to contract, and it ended up being quite modular because I can paste how many pistons I want and then use logic to turn the steering blocks in the crankshaft to set the relative positionings of each piston. Now that I have an engine with high power and doesn't breakdance, I can add propellers and work on balancing the torque. I duplicated the engine and flipped it, and then used some linkages to add propellers on the same rotational axis, and it works great. I realized that these pistons were contracting at the same time anyways, so I compacted the engine onto the same sliders, which then ensures synchronization between both propellers. We did it, folks! I finally have a powerful and balanced engine. So let's move on to the aircraft itself. I stuck a set of wings, an elevator, and a vertical stabilizer onto the engine, and the thing already flies, adding some ailerons and air brakes, and I'm honestly really happy with how it's flying. I was afraid of running into power versus weight ratio issues, but this thing is taking off pretty quickly. I then gave the plane inverted gull wings inspired by the Corsair. In real life, these prevented the Corsair's propellers from striking the ground, and allowed for a shorter and more robust landing gear for carrier landings. I added gull wings because I thought they looked cool, and I don't know, they've just got that Navy World War II vibe. Now that I have an aircraft, I started to work on the payload. I thought dropping singular bomb blocks would be lame, so I made this. Here's the thing, dropping multiple bombs in one spot doesn't really do much in Besiege. In order to increase the explosion radius, you need to drop more bombs spread out. So this bomb I made here is somewhat of a cluster bomb. Once dropped, this ring spins rapidly before detaching 4 bombs at a predetermined height. These bombs then fling outward from centrifugal force to create the saturated square of fire. Nice. I then attached this bomb to the prototype aircraft, which allowed for some test runs. The air brakes do work, but almost too well as the aircraft falls unrealistically slow. Also, when deployed, the aircraft nose seems to jerk backwards, probably due to the air brakes being below the center of gravity. Honestly, however, I thought these things were fine. What wasn't fine were these wings, which were as strong as discount single-ply toilet paper. Any intense maneuver led to instant confetti, which may or may not be an issue for dive bombers. Something I had learned somewhat recently is that lift actually comes from these propeller blocks instead of the deceivingly named wing blocks. So I replaced this row of weak wing panel blocks with 2 stretched logs. These wing blocks do however give good stabilization, so they're staying here on the back. These wings are now much stronger. Next, I added a retractable landing gear. It has suspension for soft landings and tucks neatly behind the engine. I chose this over retracting into the wings because I had a feeling that the wings were going to get pretty thick once I added surfaces. Also, I finally added some yaw control with this rudder for the airplane enthusiasts that have been screaming at me to do so already. Well, here we are folks, we've got a working engine-powered aircraft. Now it's time for a bit of a makeover. Here's the completed build. With the extra weight, it's definitely slower than it was before, but I'm still pretty happy with its flight performance. It was having trouble taking off at first, but turning off the aerodynamic option from all the surface blocks helped immensely. I won't delay any longer. Let's see this thing in action. Well, there you have it folks, a working engine-powered dive bomber. Not only that, but I actually have a bit of a surprise for you. Ta-da! I actually did manage to make a working radio engine in the end, and it seems to have some significant power. So if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe and comment below what you would like to see next. Also, if you're confused about my music choices for this video, my last video got copyrighted, so this time I had to use music available through licensing. Sorry for the slow upload schedule, and thanks for watching.